Has anyone heard of this city? No one seems to remember it, and something horrific might have happened to it. Third and final part. This was a turning point for us. And then luck struck again. All attempts at fishing had failed so far, but all of a sudden there were fish everywhere in the river. We soon learned that there were different periods for when the fish was out to sea or close to land. However, as soon as they came close to land, mysterious purple thunderstorms that lasted weeks tormented the city. And yet, we survived. Many people didn't, of course, but life was possible. In the end, we prevailed. During the 5 years that followed, there weren't that many catastrophes, and our focus on survival kept most of our thoughts of home away. Even Isabel thought less and less of her parents as she grew older. Over time, most people got used to the bizarre situation they had found themselves in back in July 2013. Many people did commit suicide, yes, but most people choose to live on in this unknown land. Two events, however, changed things. First, it was what happened to a planned expedition at sea. Hundreds of people, mostly men, decided to venture out into the ocean with one of the luxury cruisers that had been moored next to the city. This was going to be a great adventure and, perhaps, a way to find some answers to where we had ended up. It inspired all of us. Thousands of people, Isabella and I included, had gathered to watch as the huge boat slowly sailed out. It all felt similar to that day 5 years earlier when we had waited for the amusement park to open. We all stared at the horizon as the boat, named Birdo to a Sparrow, turned into a small dot against the setting sun. We imagined the amazing adventures they would be on and looked forward to their return. But then something that must have been larger than anything we had seen so far came out of the water and swallowed Birdo to a Sparrow whole. Some people screamed and others cried. This was a hard blow to the city. Just knowing that a being like that, a being able to eat an entire luxury cruiser in one bite, could exist deprived many people their hopes of a future. The next event was different. It was a miracle, to say the least. It happened only a month after the destruction of Birdo to a Sparrow. A military guard, a young man who had only been 15 at the time of our disappearance from Earth, discovered that when he stood at a certain place of Freja Square, he could tune into a specific radio station from our old world. The station's name was Synthwave Mix and dedicated most of its broadcasting to that kind of music. Hope returned immediately, but this time the hope was different from the one we had spent 5 years building up within ourselves. This was the hope of seeing our loved ones again, the hope to return home. The people at the university investigated the area to try and determine where the radio signals were coming from. They didn't have much success, but soon realized that they emanated from the ground beneath Freja Square. While the area was investigated by the scientists, ordinary people showed up en masse. They all had radios of different kinds with them, like children carrying stuffed animals to feel safe, hoping to tune into Synthwave Mix and get a taste of their lost home. Of course, the area where the radio station could be heard was too small, and the police had to chase everyone away to give the scientists the room they needed. A few days later, though, the scientists placed a set of large speakers at the foot of the statue of Freja and connected them to the receiver they were using to listen in on the radio station. Day and night the relaxed, somewhat melancholic synthetic music played non-stop to the entire city. People congregated around the statue. They even defied the dangers of the night. This became our city's new tradition. Ending the day by going to the statue and sitting down around it, as if in prayer, became our pilgrimage. It wasn't exactly the music that drew people to the square, but rather its origin. Still, the electronic melodies soon turned into a symbol of all of our hopes and desires. From time to time, people got up and danced, sometimes while crying from a bittersweet joy difficult to explain. Although, the thing that made us all go silent and become totally focused was when the host said something. Usually, they only spoke about the music they were broadcasting, completely unaware that an entire city full of people were listening to them almost religiously, but on rare occasions, they talked about the world outside. At those times it felt like our hearts collectively stopped in anticipation. Would they say something about us, about their efforts to figure out where we all had gone, and how they would bring us back? But there was never any news about us, just as if they had already forgotten about us or never known about us at all. The tragic fate of the city of Korona never came up. Yet, we never lost faith. It took a long time, and now I'm getting closer to the present day, but eventually, the scientists decided that it would be worthwhile digging a large hole right where the radio waves seemed to sip out of the ground. This was no easy task and neither was it safe. The work took weeks. Again, we all helped. No one really knew what exactly we were looking for, we only knew that it was something. When we reached the bottom, where the rock was too hard to dig through, a mountain of dirt covered the entire square. Our efforts hadn't been in vain, we discovered. Right beneath the place where the radio waves had been picked up, there was a small hole in the bedrock. People were asked to back away from it while the scientists investigated it. First, they tried to measure how deep it was. This took some time since it was hard to find a long enough rope. In the end, it was estimated to be about 700 meters deep. Next, some equipment was sent down tied to the end of the rope, and to everyone's surprise, everything that was sent down was swallowed by the hole. Of course, no one knew where it went, but we all thought the same thing. that, somehow, it had returned home. It was a reasonable assumption given that the only thing coming out of the hole, the radio waves, came from Earth. We all rejoiced in this discovery. More experiments were done, and although some questions remained unanswered, the consensus, even among the scientists, was that the hole really was a portal back to our own world. There were two large problems that needed to be solved though. The first was the safety. Every time something tied to the rope disappeared at the bottom of the hole, the rope was cut off just like the skyscraper 5 years earlier. This meant that it was possible that whoever entered the hole would be cut off as well. However, this problem was solved pretty soon. By tying a camera to the rope, connected to a screen above ground, it was discovered that the rope was only cut off when pulled back. As long as it wasn't pulled back, the screen still received signals from the camera. The camera never recorded anything other than darkness on what was assumed to be the other side, but since it continued to work until the rope was pulled back, this didn't seem to be such a big problem. After all, some technical issues were expected under the circumstances. The second problem was that the hole was too small for anyone to fit into. Many attempts were made to widen the hole, but the bedrock seemed to be made out of a stronger material than any of our machines could tear into. This was extremely frustrating. It made us feel like we had reached the finish line, only to discover that we were unable to cross it. In the end, one of the scientists said she wanted to send her 10-year-old son down the hole. He was small enough to fit into it. This was widely debated for quite some time before it was approved. The mother argued that the city of Korona was no place for her son, and that all the evidence suggested the hole was the only way home. The boy was brave. He knew he would probably never see his poor mother again, but still went through with it. He was given a walkie-talkie, and after a tear-filled goodbye to his mother, he was sent down the 700 meters deep, pitch-black hole. He was instructed to radio in after he reached the other side, confirming he was safe. After the rope was pulled back, the mother waited and waited for her son to report. However, he never did. For weeks, the mother sat at the edge of the hole, under merciless heat and under pouring rain, calling her son over and over again with her walkie-talkie. No one knew what, if anything, had gone wrong. Since no other radio waves had been picked up other than synthwave mix, it was possible that other radio waves simply couldn't enter into our world for some reason. Still, the authority deemed the hole too unsafe for anyone else to enter. This didn't change people's minds though. The hole represented the only true hope we had felt in years. And given all the horrible things in our world that could destroy us at any moment as easily as it is for us to blow out a candle, the small risk of going through the hole seemed to be more than acceptable. The hole was guarded by the police, but most of the police shared the city's collective opinion that the hole was the only way out. Not for any of the adults, but for our children. And now I'm sitting here, in the room I paid for 5 years ago, writing this down. During the last few weeks, many parents have been sending their children down the hole at night. This world is truly no place for them. Although they could survive, they deserve better. Hence, like many others, I've decided to send Isabella home. When I told her about it, she looked at me with a happiness in her eyes I hadn't seen since we were transported to this dreadful, God-forsaken world. I've been writing this all day now. It's my testimony to what happened to Korona. I will give this notebook to Isabella. I'm sure she will be able to give it to her father. Somehow, I know it in my heart that she will find her way home to her parents. Soon it will be dark, and I will bring Isabella to Freja's Square one last time. I'm sorry it took so long. Helena.